I think I don't think you go find astrology. I think it finds you. I think if you talk, I don't know. I mean, everybody I've spoken to, they didn't plan to do this. You know, I didn't plan to do this, but I ended up doing it for the last 30 plus years. So it's okay.
And just like talking to Maggie, a few other people talked to me, or that I talked to, they're the group that said, this is interesting, but this can't be real. So let me learn enough about it to disprove it.
Yeah, well, because when it comes to you and you find it, and you're in an age, I think we're still in that sort of place now, but it's not like it was in the 70s or the 60s when it was considered to be very strange. I think 30 or 40 years ago when you were starting this, if it was interesting, even if you were studying it, it wasn't anything that was in the reality of anybody to become like a professional career or where it was valid. It was because it was a hobby, it was something. And I think now, since the internet came in the early 90s, you know, where everybody suddenly had access to it, that now it's a lot safer time to do this because there's more information, there's a lot more people that can talk and connect. But it took a lot of risks to do something like this. It's like the risks that chiropractors took, you know, when they were trying to get licensed in all these states and people thought they were quacks, you know. So anyway.
I want to know a little bit about your background, what your educational background is.
You want to know my educational background? Well, life has been a really good education first. I have a Bachelor of Science from Northwestern University in Chicago, which is, I'm very proud of that. It was a hard school in speech and communications. And I have a Master's in Business Administration from Pepperdine University in California. And I have had extensive graphic training. And I have been, I had to learn to speak Greek when I was a very young child, from 7 to 14 years of age. So I'm pretty fluent with that language, modern Greek. And I've had a lot of training in business administration and a lot of training in marketing. And I write. I've done a lot of writing. But those are my main degrees. And I have no intention for going back for a PhD. No. There's no way I'm going to go there. It's my education.
Must be burnt out on all that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I did it. That's for young people. I admire all our teachers that are going back for their PhDs, like Bruce and then Rob and, you know, I mean, and Dennis, he was our teacher. I really admire that because they were in their 50s and 60s when they did it. I think it takes a lot of chutzpah. But I'm not doing it. And then I do have a huge investment background. I mean, I have a real estate license in the state of California for 30 years. I come from a family of investors, land development, and I'm actually involved in that a lot now as people are aging and I'm having to take over more duties. So my life is sort of a hybrid of education and experience.
When along that road did you find astrology?
I know exactly when I found it. There was 2 times I found astrology. One was I didn't know I'd found it. And one was about maybe 18 years, no, 13, yeah, interesting, 13 or 14 years later. The first time I found it was when I was 7. And my mother used to give me a quarter to clean the house. And I'd walk to the local drugstore, and in those days they had a lot of Dell books and stuff, and they had these little Dell books, I don't even know if they make them anymore, that were for astrology. They were the signs. I just saw birthdays and the symbols, and I'd buy them and read them, but I didn't know what it was. I just thought they were really interesting. Plus, at the same time, I was buying books, Edith Hamilton's book on mythology, and I mean, I was buying all these very interesting books with my quarters. And then I went through school, grew up, did a lot of theater, dance, and I came out to California, and I was working for a PR firm when I was 22 in San Francisco, and we had a woman that was in for only 3 days. She was an Irish lady, I mean, big, beautiful, auburn-haired with an Irish brogue, and she was only there for 3 days. So she sat on the desk next to me, and she pulled out this book, which happened to be Joan Quigley's book. I can't even remember the name of it. It was a real thick book. And I saw her reading this book, and I saw those symbols. And it you know, it sort of triggered something in my head, and I asked her what it was, and she said, "Oh, this is astrology. This is wonderful, wonderful information." And I said, "You know, I think I used to read about that when I was a little girl." And she said, she gave me the book. She just, you know, she said, "Well, here, take it and read." I said, "No." So I read it in one night. I mean, I literally went through that book maybe 1 or 2 nights, got it back to her before she left. Then the synchronicity of that is, at the time I was married, and he had a radio show, and I told him about this, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting, because I'm going to have a couple of astrologers on my show." Yeah. So I listened to the show, and I'd read this book, and I told him when he came home, I said, "You know, I think I'd like to study this. It really makes sense." And that's how it started. We for Christmas, that was the Christmas gift, we had readings. Soon after, I was very divorced. It's okay. I mean, it was okay. We were both young. And I started taking classes in my early 20s. And it was incredible. I mean, it just stuck with me. There was something, it just stuck. It made sense. It gave order to my chaotic life. And you know, a little bit of an obsessive compulsive disorder here. Not really, but you know, when you have a lot of anxiety and you're not sure about what's going on, this is a nice thing, because it kind of gives you a sense of what's going on, and like gives you patterns. That's what I loved about it, the patterns. And so I started to study at that point, and I got involved, a lot of reading. I remember from when I was 22 to the time I got out of my MBA program, which was around 29, 30 maybe, I had like piles of books next to my bed. I mean, I had 3 or 4 books going on at once. I would work by day and read at night. A lot of self-taught. And then I went to some AFA conferences, and you know, and then when I went back to school for my MBA in my late 20s, I had been in the advertising business, and Pepperdine was a very traditional Christian school, but it was a good education. And I started to see some correlations between business and astrology. And for my thesis, I had 3 different professors. One who was actually a Northwestern grad. He was older, a little bit more critical, old school. I had one wonderful teacher who was Mormon, humanistic teacher. One was the old stodgy guy, was kind of rules, you know. But the one, what was his name? Tom Pendergast was my teacher. He was the statistics guy, like Mark. And I said to him, I said, "You know, I'm thinking of doing my thesis on astrology and vocations." He loved it. But Walter, the Mormon, he was great, he was open, but the older stodgy professor said, either this woman is either out of her mind, this is what he told me, he said, or she's brilliant. That's actually what he told me. And she better damn well have her thing done. And so Tom Pendergast, the stats teacher, because I had some trouble with the stats, he was wonderful. So the thesis was on advertising traits, basically mercurial traits in the charts of advertising people. And I did you have to write a prequel, I guess, I don't know if that's what it's called, but you have to do all the research, you know. So I did a lot of research with Robert Ornstein's Psychology of Consciousness, which is still, in my estimation, one of the best books ever written on the right and left brain. And I went back and looked at old research on phrenology, you know. Basically, the idea of it was astrology, the other side of the paradigm, or another reality. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was about the other side of the paradigm was the idea. Trying to give the open show that there are other realities operating in this world other than just this, and using that and some other like ancient techniques as a premise how we can give a larger picture regarding people. So it was accepted. Tom Pendergast, my stats teacher, worked very hard with me on the stats, and it was really a great project. I mean, I learned a lot, and it's made me start to think, well, maybe I should do this for a living, you know, which was a little tough because I wasn't supposed to be doing this. I was supposed to be being trained for the family business, you know. I mean, it was like, you're going to go into this, right? But this was calling me, and so I just decided, well, I'm going to see what happens. I started seeing correlations between markets, and I started thinking about, well, what's an incorporation chart? Carol Mull had done way back when, about 25 years ago, she'd written a book on the Fortune 500, Standards and Poor's, and I saw that. And Grace Morris, still a very dear friend of mine with the Apollon group we have, they started having these conferences. A couple of years later, I was pregnant with my second child, and first child actually, and went to New York for the first business astrology conference in New York. I mean, I think I was about 6 months pregnant with Alexandra. And I met Bill Meridian and Arch Crawford, and I thought, wow, there's other people doing this? This is cool. It was really cool, because they were all dressed in suits, right? I was used to that world, but they weren't thinking like suits. You know, they were, but they weren't. And it was something that I guess part of it, what I found it fascinating, but it was also with my very strong Saturn in the 4th, it was like, okay, this is the responsible way to do astrology. And that's what happened.
Well, what was the general feeling in the astrological community with people that weren't involved with Kepler? What was
Then? I don't think they understood it. I think the reason that they didn't understand it or get involved immediately, and maybe still are having issues with getting involved, is because I think it is such an out-of-the-box concept. You know, it's not as out-of-the-box now as it was then, but I think as we keep sending graduates out who come to conferences like UAC presenting incredible material, which is, quite frankly, comparable to other presentations which are not the same. You can tell somebody that's had the training at Kepler, there's a, and I'm not being egotistical when I say this, but there's a quality of information that is not in a lot of, not everybody's, but not in some of the presentations. And I think part of what Kepler people need to do when they get out there is integrate, you know, like I did in my lectures, you know, I'm citing a lot of sources because as a teacher at Kepler, this is what we require our students to do, which is something that, you know, a lot of people who are astrologers haven't had a formal education, which doesn't mean that they're not smart. But, you know, it's like my kid with his checkbook. You think he knows how to do it because he's going to college, but they don't know. You got to show them how to do a checkbook, right? It's the same concept. Lest I diverge, that's another story.
I've got much better at my citations, Georgia.
Oh, you are very good at your citations, you know. Very, very good.
You got on to me regularly about that.
Did I really?
Yes.
See, I don't remember that. Cite your source? Did I used to say the cite your source thing? Cite your source. Where's the source? What's the source?
Yeah.
I was mean.
No, you weren't mean. You
Yeah.
got the point.
Yeah.
You guided us into doing it correctly.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's, I think, that why there's still maybe even a difficulty in the concept, because it is not a concept that is any place else. There are some very good astrological schools. Avalon is a great school, you know. ESAR has their accredited, I mean, everybody, NCGR, but academic is, I think it's an out-of-the-box concept. And I was telling Enid actually this morning at breakfast, I think it'd be very cool at conferences if we could give snippets of presentations that we give at Kepler. I understand that Lee and Rob are actually doing condensed versions of what they do at Kepler. And actually the currency piece and the real estate piece I did, I think would have been considered Kepler material, you know. So anyway, yeah, I think the more we do that, and I think we have to remember to say Kepler College, you know, I mean, I think we take it for granted. We forget to say, oh, by the way, I'm in school at Kepler College, which also requires a person to have the guts to say, I'm going to a college of liberal arts that teaches astrological studies. It takes some courage to step out.
I think a lot of us have developed that.
The ability to step out, yeah. Yeah, and I actually think it would be a great course, or even an evening thing to do at a regular meetings of Kepler, to teach people how to deal with media, and to talk with people in the community about, you know, when you're in a party or something and somebody asks you what you do and where you're going and how to handle it even when you get the worst responses. I think you learn that over time. I learned this actually about 30 years ago when I was learning from my first teacher, Jean Mulgrew. When people would say, what do you do? Because people always ask that, what do you do for a living? And she was a little tiny thing, and she said, I just put my back up and I say I'm a professional astrologer. And I always remembered her saying that. And I still say it to this day. And I go, what, it's an attitude. And I think we need to do that with Kepler too, when we're speaking about Kepler.
So, what can we do better then?
I think technology, I've had this discussion with Enid, and I'm not a technical person, but technology is my magic wand as an astrologer. The difference between no computers and computers made a huge difference in my professional life. And I do think there's a huge market for teaching online, which is affordable in light of the times. I, however, have this very strict rule about teaching, because I think the live symposiums are the best. I still think we need to improve on that and have more of those. But if we could get the technology, which I know exists, but now is getting better, where when we teach online, we not only show them our desktop, they can hear us, which they can at a conference number. You can even send a note with a chat. But with a tablet, actually write on a whiteboard. Because I'm going to do that when I go back now, get a tablet and start working with Enid. I don't know, I've seen that. An artist friend of mine had it, because if you want to do a glyph, you want to write the glyph. You don't want to type LI for Libra. You want to do the glyph, at least for me, as an artist. And once we do that, and we do more of that, and do more of that, that's incredible. There's an incredible, incredible opportunity for people to learn and not have to travel. I still think symposiums are important. But that would be a way of feeding symposiums. Plus, I still believe live teaching is very important, because the learning model, some people are visual, some people are auditories, and some people are kinesthetic. And they don't just learn from words and reading. People have to touch a board, work with a graph like we did in our symposiums when you're figuring out graphic ephemeris, to work with it. That's why they teach kindergartners how to paint and use crayons, so that they access the right side of the brain, because astrology is not a left brain science. It is a left and right brain science, and it needs to be, both sides have to be working. So if the technology could be developed to the point where you could actually do that kind of flowing, interactive writing, and as well as speaking and listening, I think would be great. It's a virtual school. I think one of the charts is Aquarius rising, which is I think that's one of the charts that's used. I think that's the date Joanne got the notice that they were legal. They had Aquarius rising, and the time. And I don't know. I actually really think we should get some grants. We should get some really good, sharp grant writers, because there is a lot of money out there, from what I understand. It's waiting to be given to something creative and unusual and new. And if you could have a grant written where you, like I do this currency thing, which is really the history of money, and I'm not saying this to get a grant, it's an example. History of money, but incorporating astrological, very specific dates, degrees, signs at certain turning points of currency. That's the real world, and it's bringing in this other world. And if you could write grants where you present grants as a correlation opportunity to try some new ways of thinking, people can write. I think that would be a way to get some funding, but I don't know. I don't know people who write grants. I don't know anything about writing grants. I just know I've heard there's an awful lot of money. Like there's a Fetzer Institute on the East Coast that is a very unusual institute. A lot of people.
Maybe we need a grant writing course.
Oh, I would love to get a grant writing course. I would take that course.
That'd be great.
Oh.
We could have all the students have a grant proposal at the end.
Oh, that's one heck of an idea. Oh my God, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That is a great idea.
I know. I'd do that sometime.
I would take the course. I'd come up to Seattle.
Could you just tell me what you hope to see for Kepler in the future?
Well, I would like to, my vision is to have actually a building where we actually have a college. I've had that vision from the very beginning. We need a library. What I see in my mind is a building with a library, with digital capacity, and a school where there's classrooms, where people can go back. It doesn't have to be a big building, but big enough for several classes to be going on at one time. That's what I see. And enough land around so if we ever wanted to add to it, we could. And I think that's what my vision is. And I always told that to Joanne, is to have a building, where we can have everybody in the same place exchanging ideas, even if it's only part-time. so other people can have their real life, you know. And because I think when you're with each people when people in a live environment, you feed more, like this idea that we just came up with. That's not something that would come up in an email. An email is about sending information for what a person needs. So that's what I think. That's my vision. And having a large school that has crossbreeds. You know, like that movie. Remember that Maureen O'Hara movie, The Rare Breed, with John Wayne, where she brings her Hereford from Ireland, and there's the Longhorns, and the Texans are fighting about keeping the Longhorns, and she's got this real stocky Hereford that she's going to bring into the U.S. And it's the guy says it's never going to survive the winter, and at the end of the winter they just set this Hereford out into the wilderness. They find it dead after the winter, but they find a calf that's a Longhorn and a Hereford, and that's what I see for Kepler. I see a hybrid person coming out of there that's well educated, not only in astrology, but has incorporated the real world with the virtual world, with the metaphysical world. That's what I see. And dang, I wasn't going to do this. This is not me right now. But that's what I see. I want to see that Hereford Longhorn. And I think that would make an incredible human being on this planet. I think we're going to need that. I mean, if they can do a euro, where they take all those currencies and put them together and make it work, even though they're having their problems, and we can have a North American currency at some point, then we can have hybrid students, you know, people in the world who know all these things. And that's my thoughts, my closing thoughts.